Hi guys, my name is Jasmine, and today I'm going to talk about how competitive cheer is a sport. So if I could get a raise of hands for people, if you guys have played a sport before, any type of sport. Okay, so that's many of you. So I'm sure that you've all played different sports, not the same sport, whether it's football, swimming, dance, baseball, tennis, the list goes on and on. And for me, my sport would be competitive cheerleading. I know that some people would say that cheer is not a sport and it shouldn't be recognized, but after years of personal experience, research, injuries, and physical skills I have gained, I must disagree. My claim today is that competitive cheer is a sport, and I'm going to explain just how and why it is important and is considered one. So, some of you may be wondering why it matters whether or not it is considered a sport or an activity, but defining competitive cheer as a sport would create many benefits for the athletes that they do not have currently. By making competitive cheer a sport, it will provide appropriate safety measures that will protect the athletes, decrease the stereotypes that have been created for cheerleaders, and lastly, help meet requirements for gender equality. If competitive cheer is considered a sport, it would keep athletes who cheer and compete safe by adding more restrictions in favor of their well-being and protection. An example of how a cheerleader can benefit from this would be the article that was released from USA Today in 2014 announcing that the American Medical Association designates cheerleading a sport. The policy that they created basically states that they can and will support better safety measures, which will include avoiding inappropriate surfaces when performing stunts, flips, and following rules for properly performing stunts. Just as different sports are required to play on certain fields in certain different conditions in order to keep the athletes safe, cheerleaders deserve the same privileges and would be provided with them if they were deemed an official sport. By making competitive cheer a sport, it would raise curiosity about what the sport really entails. The stereotypes that have generated demeaning assumptions about cheerleaders and their lack of physical abilities give competitive cheer the title of being the stereotypes that have been generated create demeaning assumptions about cheerleaders and their lack of physical abilities. Giving competitive cheerleaders the title of being a sport gives athletes a chance to educate and make people aware of the false stereotypes that exist, deeming cheer to be less than a sport. This gives athletes a chance to defend the fact that their emphasis of appearance in cheerleading does not detract from their sportiness and physical ability required. If competitive cheer were to be considered a sport, it would be giving women athletes the same benefits other athletes of other sports are provided with, thus creating equality and fairness among all athletes. Now, you guys are probably wondering what it even means to be a sport, even though we probably all played it. But the definition states that it must involve physical exertion in performing a skill in which an individual or team competes against another for others' entertainment. A good example of a sport that we're probably all familiar with would be football. Football is a sport that involves physical exertion throughout the entire game and or practice. Football is a contact sport that also has a competitive side, which is another defining factor of a sport. According to the National Football League operations, each NFL team will play a total of 16 games in a 17-week season. A statistic from Business Insider showed that collegiate student athletes will practice anywhere from 20 to 40 hours a week. As a typical all-star competitive cheerleader under the age of 18 years old, they will spend anywhere from 20 to 30 hours a week practicing as well. Just like football involves and requires a great deal of strength, agility, and focus, so does competitive cheerleading in different ways. After reading these defining factors that determine what it is deemed a sport, competitive cheerleading covers all those aspects, and I will explain just how. Cheer is similar to other sports and covers the criteria that requires the sport to be considered what it is. Like I said before, the cheerleaders will practice anywhere from 20 to 30 hours a week in order to prepare for a competition where they have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to compete. Teams will compete anywhere from 7 to 10 times in a cheer season, and throughout the season they're constantly changing their routine, adding more difficulty, adding harder stunts that would typically be done in a different sport where they'll change their plays or strategies. Cheerleaders do the same thing in order to win. For any activity to be considered a sport, it must involve some form of competition, and if it goes without saying, competitive cheerleading revolves around competing. Throughout the routine, you must perform stunts, tossing girls anywhere from 10 to 25 feet in the air, jumps executed in sync with your other teammates, and tumbling that must be done safely and landed precisely. These routines must be done in time with complete accuracy and perfect execution and no mistakes in order to win or even place in general. That part pretty much covers the competitive aspect that is required of a sport, but next would be the physical exertion that is required of its athletes when being a part of a specific sport. Athletes who cheer and compete must be in the best possible shape in order to perform the physical tasks expected of them. Just like any other athlete, it takes vigorous workouts, practice, and hard work in order to get in shape to perform. How competitive cheerleaders keep up with the physical demanding task involves not only just taking normal practices, but they take other classes as well, including stretching classes, tumbling classes, stunting classes, weight training classes. The head coach from the University of South Florida, Manny Rotella, agrees that just like any other sport with cheer, you can't just practice once or twice a week to be a good competitive cheerleader. It involves working out every day so that you're strong enough to control your own body and throw other people in the air. Everything that the definition states about a sport describes exactly what is expected of an athlete who is a competitive cheerleader. As cheerleading has evolved over the years into more than just shaking pom-poms and now involves an immense amount of physical agility, competitiveness, and dedication, it deserves the recognition of being deemed a sport. Thank you.
Did you have that nude outline for me?
I'll email it to you.
Well, that doesn't mean no good.
I'll email it
All right.
to you. Sorry.
I'll never see it. All right. It's okay. Okay. The proposition is clearly identified. I appreciated that. You've got so many issues that you're using in the beginning of the speech that I think are going to be relevant and important to your argument, but they never get organized and sorted into a structure that is previewed for the audience, and there's not really very clear signposting in the body of the speech. So to me, the problem with your argument has little to do with the comparisons that you're making or even some of the evidence that you present. It has to do with the way the material is being put together. It sounds like a long essay instead of a focused argument, and I think you need to put in some numerical structures. I think that we talked about this, that there are some straightforward claims that could be made, secondary claims that should be distinct. But as it is, you kind of wander around and suggest ideas. Well, what is a sport? Which is a question as opposed to a declarative statement. You make comparisons to other sports, which I think is good, but the inference here is that cheerleading meets the standard of a sport because it compares favorably to these other sports. And the same thing with the physical exertion issue. So I think you've got relevant points in the speech, but it's hard to break it down and see how they all fit together at the end. I think your argument would be a lot stronger if it was more focused. You had some good examples in the presentation that you used for your comparisons. There's a couple of pieces of testimony. I like the AMA information. I like the information from the coach down at the University of South Florida, I guess it was. There's some data that seems to be suggested about what happens in the competitions that I'm sure is true, although I didn't get a source citation on it, based on the number of competitions that people go to, for instance, and based on the number of hours that competitive cheer involves. I know that you got that information someplace, but I couldn't tell you exactly where, and I think that that's a little bit problematic. I think the generalizations are strong. Your presentation is, look, you sound like you know what you're talking about. You're pretty forceful. It's, like I said, the structural things that I have issue with. All right. Thank you.